Welcome to Wednesday's reading session. Now, today we are going to be looking at our vocabulary in our text. So, we're going to be looking at our next chapter and focusing on some maybe difficult vocabulary and to understand those by looking at the definitions and those meanings to really get into the context of our text. I wish that Macready would hurry up and take all these people away, said Susan presently. I'm getting horribly cramped. And what a smell of camphor, said Edmund. I expect the pockets of these coats are full of it, said Susan, to keep the moths away. There's something sticking in my back, said Peter. And isn't it cold, said Susan. Now that you mention it, it is cold, said Peter. And hang on, it's wet too. What is the matter with this place? I'm sitting on something wet. It's getting wetter every minute. He struggled to his feet. Let's get out, said Edmund. They've gone. Oh, said Susan suddenly, and everybody asked what was the matter. I'm sitting against a tree, said Susan, and look, it's getting light over there. By Jove, you're right, said Peter. And look, there and there, it's trees all around, and this wet stuff is snow. Why, I do believe we've got into Lucy's wood after all. And now there was no mistaking it, and all four children stood blinking in the daylight of a winter day. Behind them were coats hanging on the pegs. In front of them were snow-covered trees. Peter turned at once to Lucy. I apologise for not believing you, he said. I'm sorry. Will you shake hands? Of course, said Lucy, and she did. And now, said Susan, what do we do next? Do, said Peter. Why, go and explore the woods, of course. Oh, said Susan, stamping her feet. It's pretty cold. What about putting on some of these coats? They're not ours, said Peter doubtfully. I am sure nobody would mind, said Susan. It isn't as if we wanted to take them out of the house. We shan't even take them out of the wardrobe. I never thought of that, Sue, said Peter. Of course, now you put it that way, no one could say you had bagged a coat as long as you leave it in the wardrobe where you found it. And I suppose this country is in the wardrobe. They immediately carried out Susan's sensible plan. The coats were rather big for them too, so they did come down to their heels and look more like royal robes than coats when they had put them on. But they all felt a good deal warmer, and each thought of the others looked better in the new get-up and more suitable in the landscape. We can pretend we're Arctic explorers, said Lucy. This is going to be exciting enough without pretending, said Peter, as he began leading the way forward into the forest. There were heavy, darkish clouds overhead, and it looked as if there might have been more snow before night. I say, said Edmund, began presently, oughtn't we to be bearing a bit more to the left, that is, if we're aiming for the lamp-post? He had forgotten for the moment that he must pretend never to have been in the woods before. The moment the words were out of his mouth, he realised that he had given himself away. Everyone stopped. Everyone stared at him. Peter whistled. So you were really here, he said. That time Lucy said she'd met you in here, and you made out she was telling lies? There was a dead silence. Well, of all the poisonous little beasts, said Peter, and shrugged his shoulders and said no more. There seemed indeed no more to say, and presently the four resumed their journey, but Edmund was saying to himself, I'll pay you all out for this, you pack of stuck-up, self-satisfied prigs. Where are we going anyway? Said Susan chiefly, for the sake of changing the subject. I think Lou ought to be the leader, said Peter. Goodness knows where she deserves it. Where will it take us, Lou? What about going to see Mr. Tumnus? Said Lucy. He's the nice fawn I told you about. Everyone agreed to this, and off they went, walking briskly and stamping their feet. Lucy proved a good leader. At first, she wondered whether she would be able to find the way, but she recognised an odd-looking tree in one place and a stump in another, brought them on to where the ground came uneven, and into the little valley, and at last to the very door of Mr. Tumnus's cave. But there was a terrible surprise awaited them. The door had been wrenched off its hinges and broken to bits. Inside the cave was dark and cold, and the damp feel and smell of the place that had not been lived in for several days. Snow had drifted in from the doorway and heaped on the floor, mixed with something black, which turned out to be charred sticks and ashes from the fire. Someone had apparently flung it about the room and then stamped it out. The crockery lay smashed on the floor, and the pictures of the fawn's father had been slashed into shreds with a knife. "This was a pretty good washout," said Edmund. "Not much coming from here." "What is this?" said Peter, stooping down. He had just noticed a piece of paper which had nailed through the carpet onto the floor. "Is there anything written on it?" asked Susan. "Yeah, I think there is," answered Peter, "but I can't read it in this light. Let's get it out in the open air." They all went into the daylight and crowded round Peter as he read out the following words. "The former occupant of these premises, the Fawn Tumnus, is under arrest and awaiting his trial on the charge of high treason against Her Imperial Majesty, Jadis Queen of Narnia, Chantelaine of Shar Pivel, Empress of the Lone Islands, etc. Also of comforting her said Majesty's enemies, harbouring spies, and fraternising with humans. Signed, Morgrim, Captain of the Secret Police. Long live the Queen." The children stared at each other. "I don't know what I'm going to like this place after all," said Susan. "Who is the Queen, Lou?" said Peter. "Do you know anything about her?" "She isn't a real queen at all," answered Lucy. "She's a horrible witch, the White Witch. Everyone, all the wood people, hate her. She has an enchantment over the whole country, so that it's always winter here, and never Christmas." I wonder if there's any point in going on," said Susan. "I mean, it doesn't seem particularly safe here, and it looks as if it won't be much fun either. And it's getting colder every minute, and we've brought nothing to eat. What about just going home?" "Oh, but we can't," said Lucy suddenly. "Don't you see? We can't just go home, not after this. It is all on my account that the poor fawn has got into this trouble. He hid me from the witch and showed me the way back. That's what it's meant by comforting the witch's enemies and fraternising with humans. We simply must try and rescue him." I'd like you to carry on for your independent read now for the rest of this chapter. Okay, so you will have seen our highlighted words. I hope you've jotted those down as we've gone along. If not, you can always go back and grab those. I want you to find the definitions of our unfamiliar words and write, as usual, just a little sentence to explain them. And then after you have done that, I would like you to write 2 I wonders from the events that have taken place in this chapter. Maybe a prediction of what's going to happen next, and I wonder what's going to happen to the fawn or the children. Okay, so 2 I wonders for me, and I look forward to reading them.